They say you don't burn your life down overnight. They say it happens slowly, one small compromise at a time. But looking back, I realize that's a lie we tell ourselves to soften the blow. I didn't stumble into ruining my marriage. I walked into it with my eyes wide open, arrogant enough to believe I was the one woman on earth who could play with fire and never get burned. My name is Elena. For 8 years, I was married to David. David was safe. He was a high school math teacher, a man who found comfort in routines, spreadsheets, and predictability. When we met in our early 20s, his stability was exactly what I craved. But as I climbed the corporate ladder at a high-pressure commercial real estate firm, that stability started to feel like a cage. I was 32, making 3 times his salary, constantly flying to major cities, dining in 5-star restaurants, and vibrating with an energy David just couldn't understand. I loved him, but I wasn't in awe of him anymore. I mistook his quiet contentment for a lack of ambition. That was my first mistake. It started in late October. My firm had just landed a massive account, a sleek new tech startup looking to secure prime office space in downtown Chicago. The CEO was a man named Marcus. Marcus was everything David wasn't. He was 38, wore custom-tailored suits that cost more than my first car, and had a predatory confidence that commanded the attention of every room he walked into. Our first meeting lasted 3 hours. The professional boundary blurred almost immediately. We volleyed banter back and forth across the boardroom table, a subtle game of one-upmanship that left my pulse racing. When the meeting ended, he didn't hand me his business card. He leaned in, smelling of expensive cologne and black coffee, and whispered, "I don't think I can negotiate with you, Elena. You're far too distracting." I should have shut it down. I was a married woman. I had a beautiful home, a husband who had never raised his voice at me, and a life most people would kill for. But the thrill of being desired by a man with that much power? It was a drug, and I took the first hit without hesitation. The affair didn't begin in a bedroom. It began in text messages. We moved from emails to iMessage, then quickly to a secure encrypted app called Signal. It started as playful banter about real estate, then shifted to our personal lives, and finally to the things we wanted to do to each other. I became a master of the double life. David would be sitting next to me on the couch, watching a documentary on Netflix, while I held my phone angled away from him, typing out things that would make a sailor blush. The adrenaline rush was intoxicating. I felt like a spy in my own home. I convinced myself that this was harmless. Marcus lived in Chicago. I lived in Seattle. It was a fantasy, an escape valve for the immense pressure of my career. But fantasies demand to be realized. 2 months later, I booked a site inspection trip to Chicago. David drove me to the airport. He kissed my forehead, told me he loved me, and made sure I had my travel pillow. I smiled, told him I'd call him when I landed, and walked through security without a shred of guilt. I was completely disconnected from reality. Marcus had booked a penthouse suite at the Ritz-Carlton. When I arrived, the door was unlocked. The next 48 hours were a blur of room service, tangled sheets, and a kind of reckless passion I hadn't felt in a decade. Marcus made me feel dangerous. He made me feel powerful. When I flew back to Seattle, I walked back into my house, hugged David, and didn't feel a thing. The compartmentalization was terrifyingly easy. For the next 6 months, the affair escalated. I found excuses to fly out every 3 weeks. When Marcus came to Seattle, I would tell David I was working late at the office, only to be across town in a boutique hotel. I thought I was a genius. I paid for my burner phone in cash. I never used my personal credit cards for anything related to Marcus. I wiped my car's navigation history every time I drove to meet him. I even went as far as creating a fake female colleague named Sarah in my phone, assigning Marcus's burner number to her contact so if David ever glanced at my screen, he'd just see me texting a coworker. I was so arrogant. I thought David was too simple to ever catch on. I mistook his trusting nature for stupidity. But here is the thing about living a double life. You have to be perfect 100% of the time. The truth only needs you to slip up once. It happened on a rainy Tuesday in April. Marcus had flown into Seattle for a surprise visit. He rented a luxury Airbnb in the hills overlooking the city. I told David I had a company retreat at a lodge a few hours away and that cell service would be spotty. I packed an overnight bag, kissed him goodbye, and drove straight to Marcus's arms. We drank champagne, we ordered takeout, we laughed about our respective spouses. It was the peak of my delusion. I remember standing on the balcony of that Airbnb, looking out at the Seattle skyline, feeling like I was untouchable. I drove home the next afternoon, rehearsing the fake details of my retreat to tell David. When I pulled into the driveway, David's car was already there. He was home early from school. I took a deep breath, pasted on my perfect, loving wife smile, and walked through the front door. The house was completely silent. All the curtains were drawn. The TV was off. "David," I called out, dropping my keys in the bowl by the door. "In the dining room," his voice replied. It was flat, emotionless. I walked into the dining room, the fake stories about my corporate retreat bubbling on my lips. But the words died in my throat. David was sitting at the head of the table. In front of him wasn't a plate of food, but a manila folder. My old iPad, the one I kept in my home office and rarely used, was sitting next to it, unlocked. "How was the retreat?" he asked, his eyes locking onto mine. There was no anger in them, just an abyss of sorrow and a chilling, terrifying calm. It was good, productive, exhausting, I stammered, my heart suddenly hammering against my ribs. "Did you know," David said softly, leaning back in his chair, "that when you sync your Apple Watch to your car's Bluetooth, it occasionally triggers a backup protocol with your main iCloud account if the car's system updates?" The blood drained from my face. My Apple Watch. I used it to track my heart rate and steps. I never texted from it, so I thought it was safe. "I was looking for the recipe for that lasagna you made last month," David continued, his voice perfectly even. "I opened your iPad to check your Notes app, but an iCloud backup had just pushed through from your watch. It synced a lot of data, including location history." He opened the manila folder. He pulled out a printed sheet of paper and slid it across the mahogany table. I looked down. It was a map. It showed a red line tracing a path from my office directly to a residential street in the hills. It showed the watch remaining stationary at that address for 14 hours. "I got curious," David said. "So I did something I promised myself I would never do. I looked at our wireless provider's detailed billing log. I noticed that your phone was using an astronomical amount of data at 2 a.m. every single night while you were supposedly sleeping next to me. Data from an app called Signal." My knees literally gave out. I gripped the back of a dining chair to keep from collapsing onto the hardwood floor. "David, please," I gasped, the walls of my perfect reality crashing down around me. "Then I checked the dashcam in your car," he said, delivering the final fatal blow. "You deleted the footage from the camera itself, but you forgot that we upgraded to the cloud storage dashcam last year for insurance purposes. The footage backs up automatically over Wi-Fi." He reached out and tapped the screen of the iPad. A video started playing. It was a view from the front of my car, pulling into the driveway of the Airbnb. And then the audio. The dashcam recorded the inside of the cabin. It was my voice. I was on the phone with Marcus. "I just ditched my boring husband. I'll be in your bed in 5 minutes. Pour the champagne." Hearing my own voice say those words, dripping with disdain for the man I had promised to love and cherish, was the most sickening moment of my life. The sheer cruelty of it echoed in the silent dining room. I broke down. I threw myself onto the floor, sobbing hysterically, begging for forgiveness. I spouted all the classic cliches. It meant nothing. It was a mistake. I was stressed. "I love you." David just watched me. He didn't yell. He didn't throw things. He just watched me writhe on the floor like a pathetic, caught animal. "The worst part, Elena," he said quietly, standing up, "isn't that you slept with another man. The worst part is how easily you looked me in the eyes and lied. For months, you didn't just break my heart. You made me look like a fool. You stole my reality. I'll change. I'll quit my job. I'll never see him again, I screamed, clutching at the fabric of his jeans. He gently pried my hands off of him. I know you won't, because your bags are already packed. I looked up, confused through my tears. I took the liberty of packing your clothes. They are in the trunk of my car. I have already called my brother. He is a divorce attorney. The paperwork will be filed tomorrow morning. I want you out of this house, Elena. Right now. You can't just throw me out. This is my house, too. Panic replaced the sorrow. It's my name on the deed, Elena. We bought it before we were married, remember? You wanted it that way to protect your assets. Well, it protected mine. He walked to the front door, opened it, and stood there. If you aren't out of here in 2 minutes, I will call the police and tell them a trespasser is refusing to leave. I left. I had no choice. I drove to a hotel, a cheap, pathetic motel off the highway because my accounts were suddenly frozen pending the divorce proceedings. David had moved fast, faster than the slow, predictable man I thought he was. Sitting in that dingy motel room, smelling of stale smoke and bleach, I pulled out my burner phone. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I called Marcus. I needed him. I had blown up my life for him, and now I needed him to catch me. He answered on the third ring. Hey, babe, he whispered. Can't talk long. My wife is in the other room. Marcus, I choked out, tears streaming down my face. David knows. He caught me. He kicked me out. I need you. I don't know what to do. There was a long, agonizing silence on the other end of the line. The silence of a man who had just realized his fun little game was turning into a liability. Elena. His voice had completely changed. The warm, predatory purr was gone, replaced by a cold, corporate detachment. I am so sorry to hear that. But you know I can't be involved in this. My wife and I are expecting our second child. I can't have this blowback on my family or my company. What? I gasped, the air leaving my lungs. Expecting? You told me your marriage was dead. Elena, please, we had fun. But be an adult, don't contact me again. If you do, my lawyers will hit you with a harassment suit. Goodbye. Click. The dial tone echoed in the silent motel room. It has been 2 years since that day. The divorce was brutal. Because Washington is a community property state, but with specific fault clauses, David's attorney tore me apart. The dashcam footage, the iCloud logs, the burner phone records. It was an airtight case. I lost half my savings, my retirement, and all claim to the house. The stress of the divorce and the ensuing scandal caused my performance at work to plummet. I lost the Chicago account. 3 months later, I was quietly let go from the firm. Today, I live in a 1-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city. I work as a mid-level manager at a local logistics company. I drive a used Honda. Every morning, I wake up alone. I make my coffee alone. I eat dinner alone. I recently heard through a mutual friend that David is engaged. She's a kindergarten teacher. They just bought a dog together. The friend told me David looks happier than he has in years. He looks lighter. I used to think David was boring. I used to think my life was a cage holding me back from my true potential. But the truth is, David was my anchor. He kept me grounded. Without him, I didn't fly. I just crashed. I burned my entire world to the ground for a man who didn't even care enough to say goodbye. I traded a lifetime of unconditional love for a few hours of cheap adrenaline. So, if you're listening to this, and you're sitting on the couch next to a partner who loves you, secretly hiding a text message from someone who makes you feel alive, put the phone down. The thrill is an illusion. The devastation is permanent. And the silence of an empty apartment is the loudest sound in the world.